Welcome to our September Police Commission meeting. Hopefully, everyone enjoyed the break that we had in August, and it's good to see everyone here. I'd like to excuse, I know there were some parking situations that came up, but we have more than quorum, so we're going to move on. I want to make sure that everyone has reviewed the agenda, and after our well, I'll check for public comment, but after we review the agenda, I'm going to be looking for a motion for us to approve the minutes, and then it will have to be second so we can move forward. At this time, are there any public comments?
There is not.
Okay, thank you. If everyone, has everyone reviewed the agenda? Excuse me, the minutes. Has everyone reviewed the minutes of last meeting? Are there any questions? So, we're looking for a motion to have the minutes approved. Councilor Lemons. And do we have a second? Councilor Wynn. Thank you very much. As far as a recap of last meeting, we reviewed police policy, police commission bylaws, and the mission. And we also had a update report from Vice Chair Hawkins on law enforcement, mental health, and wellness. Her subcommittee did an update. So what I would like to do, this meeting, we will not be doing a welcome of Commissioner Parham, because he will not be at this particular meeting. He let me and Polly know. So I would like to begin with our liaison report. Commissioner Lemon.
Thank you, Chair. The Human Rights Commission actually was on vacation for the last month, so happy to return with a better report going forward. And for my commissioner comments, they're going to be pretty similar to last time. I'm still very concerned about the cameras downtown, the new ones, what they're capable of. And I wanted to thank Chief Skinner for being here so we can talk about that. And the other main concern was how a flashlight was approved as a blunt force object and how that case was sustained. So thank you, Chief Skinner, for being here so we can pick that up. Appreciate it, Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Lyman.
Thank you, Chair. The Civilian Review Board had a meeting this week. It examined a university case, a fraternity where 23 university fraternity members went to jail on a noise complaint, and there was a external complaint that generated that, and there was a very robust investigation internally by the police department and a robust investigation by the auditor. Deputy Chief Adams and Chief Skinner kind of reversed the discipline that was first suggested, or the findings first suggested by internal police review, and that's notable and something that the CRB noticed and said that's a healthy sign that the command is willing to review and take seriously and make its own judgments. So that's the CRB. We're going to hear from the auditor tonight. My commissioner comments are just, I'm glad that the breakfast thing in the park got resolved. That was one that I thought that I would be bringing up if it wasn't, but it appears to have been. So congratulations to everyone for working that one out. So that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilor Zelinka.
Thanks, Chair. First of all, Councilor Ye sent me a message that she had something come up personal and she's not gonna be able to make it tonight. Second, we were on break until this week. We came back this last week and got right into it with climate friendly equitable communities and urban renewal districts. So, if occasionally I go off camera, it's because I got this little dude and he needs to go to the bathroom a lot.
Thank you. Vice Chair, Hawkins.
Thank you, Chair. I was privileged to do a couple more ride-alongs. By the way, I attended one of the public safety training courses put on by Jonina Rager, and I highly recommend it for citizens and police commissioners and anybody at all who pretty much lives and breathes. It was very informative, and her energy and her passion for the education she's delivering is absolutely unparalleled. During some of the ride-alongs that I've done, I will say that I am always impressed with the consistent compassion and respect with which our police force addresses the amount of calls regarding homelessness and mental illness. I think I've done about half a dozen ride-alongs with our force now, and I will admit that I was watchful, perhaps overly watchful, to see, because I wanted to catch them doing something that I could complain about, and there hasn't been anything. More than anything, I've had to go back to the car with the officer and commend them for how well they handled the situation that I know darn well I would not have been able to on my own. As far as the Law Enforcement Mental Health and Wellness Subcommittee, I have heard that there is now a rest stop at the Cove Church. Chief, are you able to verify that?
I'm not able to verify.
Okay.
that.
There is, yes.
Excellent. That's great to hear. I would also at this time or during this meeting like to open up the membership roster for the subcommittee, both for folks to step into the subcommittee if their passion so drives them, or to possibly step away from it if their time commitments have become too much pressure to participate. And then one other thing was that when I accompanied an officer to the records, to the evidence unit, I was actually very pleased to find a whole lot of brochures about PSRT and the different resources that are available to the officers and staff regarding their wellness. So I appreciate the efforts that the police department is putting into promoting that. And that's it for my opening and subcommittee comments.
Thank you. Commissioner Dominguez.
Hello. I was sort of on the committee for health, and I would like to not be in it. But if we do end up doing something with regard to technology, I mean, I've been reading some books on technology specifically for the police, so I would love to be a part of that committee if we do actually do that. I think we talked about that maybe like a couple meetings ago. And then my other comment is, I had gone to the it was like the Asian celebration, and I thought it was very successful. And then later I found we got an email that said that we can't take pets. I just wanted to comment and say that I think it's very odd that we got that email, because I did bring a bearded dragon that was basically a rock, but it attracted a lot of people more so than the awards. Like, you know how you could like spin a little wheel or whatever? I just wanted to say that I think it's weird that we're not allowed to bring a pet that actually attracted more people than the little prizes. So I don't think we should keep doing that. I think we should reconsider the pet policy, because I was able to talk to people about the police commission because of that. And the last time that I was there at the Asian celebration, less people came to talk to us. So I think that that's kind of odd. Another thing is also I had a collection of books that are available at the public library about police. And I think it was weird that I was asked to remove the books. So just another thing to consider. I think it's good to educate the public. And I think it was weird that I was asked not to. So that is all.
Thank you. Commissioner Wynn.
I don't have any comments.
Commissioner Mogart.
No comment.
Commissioner Shivers.
Yeah, it's been too long since I saw all of you. It's lovely to be back at it. I absolutely agree, Bonnie, with you about the pets. With the books, I think it depends on what books and the implications of them all, and making sure that as a representative of the police commission, the commission agrees that those books represent our values. So that's a little bit more fraught when it comes to statements we intend or unintentionally make via reading selection. But as far as pets are concerned, I also see it as a net positive, especially considering like if people are scared of dogs or of lizards, there are other times that they can come up and ask questions if they're dedicated, and if not, it's a net positive. So more people is better than fewer, in my opinion.
Thank you. And I will share with you that I went to my first 7:30 a.m. to 9:30 a.m. meeting, and it'll be 6 of those for the next 6 months. I was selected by the mayor on her blue ribbon committee. The blue ribbon committee, will be addressing City of Eugene 2023 to 2026 strategic plan, and just some areas to kind of share with you. The 5 areas of the areas we're going to be focusing on is homelessness, housing, crime and safety, cleanliness of public spaces, and transportation. There's some sharp people in the room, and as far as the City of Eugene is concerned, there were open ears. They value us, they value our time, they value us, and I was looking around their room, and it was kind of like a who's who. I'm there not as the police commissioner, as a person who's a leader within the a Black community, but I'm honored to be on it, and I can share with you as much as I can, because you help me when I talk about public safety and so forth by being on this committee. Some of the stuff that you can share with me anytime, you can send me an email, whatever, of things that you might have concerns and so forth, strengthens my knowledge, and I can present more things. So y'all give me reinforcement anytime you want. Next, we have our law enforcement mental health wellness subcommittee update.
Already done, Chair.
Already done. Got you. So welcome and thank you for being here this evening. We have our chief's report. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chair Boggs. Just a little bit of an update with respect to the police department. We have, from a hiring perspective, we continue to be in a full mode of hiring both police officers, record specialists, and dispatchers. Right now, we're in background with as many as 10 police applicants, and we should be in background here shortly with as many as 14 dispatcher applicants, and continue to hire record specialists. Across the organization, we have upwards of 35 to 40 vacancies. More than half of those are police officers, so we'll continue to do that. We're in a really interesting rhythm right now, where we have a lot of officers that are reaching their 25 and 30 years of service and choosing to step away after an amazing career. And so right now, some of our hiring is not gaining as much ground as we'd like, but it's just you know, the timing. It has nothing to do with anything other than the timing of that. So we'll continue to keep doing that. We've got some things that are happening in this biennium. As you know, we're in a 2-year budget. So we are in this biennium, which started July 1st and will go for the next 2 years. One of those things that is a really, really strong initiative that we're involved in is downtown safety and cleanliness. We've hired a downtown incident commander. His name is Ray Brown. He's a retired deputy chief from the Eugene Springfield Fire Department, very gifted in incident command structure. We also are dangerously close to finalizing an intergovernmental agreement with Lane County Behavioral Health for them to recruit for a behavioral health co-responder that will be stationed in the downtown office with us, that will respond to behavioral health crisis in that downtown core. And this is not to supplant cahoots, but this is to help case manage those individuals that seem to be frequently using our services downtown, to try and get them on a path of wellness, give them an off ramp, so that we're not constantly responding to the same person downtown. And so I'm excited about that. Next month, we should hear about whether we were successful in two grant applications. One is a Bureau of Justice Administration grant for $500,000 for behavioral health co-response that will supplement what we're doing downtown and potentially expand to other areas of the city. The other grant is through the COPS office, the Department of Justice COPS office, and it's specifically for wellness around developing an EAP, which is Employee Assistance Program, specifically for law enforcement. Right now, the city does provide an EAP resource, but it's a very, very general EAP resource. And oftentimes the help and the assistance that law enforcement professionals need is nuanced and is often not taken advantage of by officers and public safety staff. So this is to build something specifically for them with people that understand the uniqueness and the trauma that happens with our police officers and our dispatchers to be able to do that. So I'm really looking forward to October and when we are able to see if we are awarded those grants, and that's gonna move us forward nicely. We are in the midst of football season, which is a very busy season for us. We're getting ready to host Hawaii this weekend. We continue to staff that and work closely with our partners at University of Oregon PD and Wayne County, and some Springfield and some private entities that do some traffic control. And so we had our first game with Portland State that was not largely attended. So it was kind of an easy day. And because of the score, they kind of filtered out. They didn't all leave at once. And so it was helpful. This will be nice to get another one of these under our belt, because next weekend is going to be a crazy weekend when Colorado comes to town with all of the, if anybody follows college football, there's a lot of hype around that game. And I think it's going to be a really crazy time. Not to mention we have students coming on board.
Do they have a new
So
head
it's gonna be
coach?
crazy. What's that?
Do they have a new head coach?
They did? Yeah, they did. And lastly, I'll say just about that, or on that front, is that we are still looking to see how our party registration might continue to help us in the fall. That's largely University of Oregon led. Their associated students of University of Oregon, their student leadership is training those fraternities and those offsite living fraternal places that are largely to blame for our huge parties, and educating them around registering for parties. And then in the event that we get those complaints, that our first touch for those would be UOPD, not EPD. And the only way we would get involved is if it just gets so out of control that we have to come in and keep order. And so it worked really well last spring. I suppose it's going to work really, really well this fall. I don't anticipate a lot of police versus student interaction as we kind of hit a rhythm around that. And with that,
We have some questions here. Commissioner Shivers?
Yeah, as part of that grant process, with the support group, is there, because we've been talking about specific supports for minority groups to increase retention as well. Do those grants have anything specifically related to the BIPOC or LGBTQ communities? And if not, is that something that the department plans on implementing ourselves?
so if I understand you correctly, you're talking about the wellness dollars for the EAP.
Yes.
grant. So that grant is only made available to existing employees and future
Mhm.
employees. So if it were existing employees that were part of the BIPOC community, or an existing employee that was LGBTQ, I mean, it certainly would cover them, but it's designed to cover everybody equally. As we build that system, it would cover everybody equally based on their unique needs, because not everybody's trauma is the same, as you know.
Yeah, exactly. So for those unique needs, I'm wondering if BIPOC and LGBTQ is a primary consideration of those, or
We the way we will approach this will be that if we get the grant awarded for the EAP system, what we'll do is we'll go out for contract with an external provider that will provide these services. And so we can build in that contract or that RFP a desire to do that. And so
Yes,
that it comes with that emphasis. So it's not something that we get the money and then we just kind of figure out how we're going to do it internally. We're actually going to get professionals that are in this space to come in and give us presentations on how they feel like they can bring value to us.
excellent. I would very much like to see those concerns in order to help us with our retention goals as well, folded into this same process. Thank you.
Great. All right, before I go into our special guest, our always special guest are, oh, we have another question? Sorry, Commissioner Lemon.
Yeah, sorry there, Chair. I had a hard time finding my button. So Chief Skinner, I was just wondering if you could give us any details on the new and the permanent camera installations that I've seen in downtown Eugene. So like just what capabilities and how are they currently being used? But also what potential might they have? And then lastly, like why did the police commission, why were we not aware of this until I was walking down the street and saw them? So I'd appreciate anything you can comment on that. Thank you.
Sure. I'm happy to comment. So we have a few fixed cameras in the downtown core through partnership with Downtown Eugene Incorporated and the private business owners where they're located. We have put up some cameras in some of our most behavioral problematic areas, or the areas that we're seeing most of the criminal behavior that we're seeing. What this does is this gives downtown a dedicated camera resource instead of our mobile camera trailers, which we have a tendency to bring in and bring out, that are needed all over the other city. Those are IP-based cameras that stream back to the downtown station, where our downtown station manager can periodically monitor those and see those. And the idea behind those is as we see behavior happening or gatherings that are starting to block the sidewalk or forcing people out in the street to be able to get out around them, before it escalates to the point where it becomes a 911 call, we're able to have the downtown team swing by and give those folks a friendly reminder. So it actually is designed to kind of preempt and deter criminal behavior and bad behavior that we're seeing in the downtown core. So capabilities are, pan, tilt, zoom. I don't know if there's any sound capabilities or not, but certainly pan, tilt, and zoom. And it's more or anything, it's a crime prevention tool, and ultimately will help us solve crime. If we capture something on the camera that we need for evidentiary purposes, we'll be able to use that for probable cause investigations.
So just a quick point of clarification. So it's live streamed, but it's also recorded?
It should have about a 30-day retention cycle and a cloud-based storage, so that we can, if we need to go back to a few days ago and see what's happening after somebody reported something happening, we're able to do that. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Wynn?
Yeah, Chief, in looking at hiring demographics, do you see new recruits coming from within the city, or are they from surrounding cities or out of state? I also want to, say that I was really impressed seeing the diversity in the recent round of new recruits. I see that photo being posted up on Facebook, which is, really what we wanted. So kudos to the recruitment team for their work.
Yeah. So the quick answer is yes to everything. Quite honestly, they're from inside the city, outside the city, University of Oregon graduates that have left and come back, people that have family. What I can tell you is that almost to a person, everybody that we've hired, when I sit down and talk to them and I ask why Eugene PD, there's some connection to Eugene, whether it's a family connection, a college connection, something connects them. Very rarely do I have anybody that's just, they threw a dart at the United States dartboard and it landed on Eugene and they thought this is a good place to come. There's always some, and that's important to me. I need to understand the why this organization, why this geography. And so everybody that you see that we've hired has got some connection to something here, which is good. And like always, with as many cycles of recruiting and hiring that we do, sometimes we see really good outcomes from our recruiting efforts around diversity, and other times we look a little vanilla. So we continue to just keep doing what we're doing, knowing that we make adjustments where we can, learn from the things that aren't working, try new things that we think might work. And so this team is committed to constantly finding different and better ways to get the right individuals into the uniform.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wynn, can I add something to what the chief was just saying? The most recent ride along I just did a couple weeks ago was with a very fresh officer, actually was just released to go solo 3 days before I did the ride along. I believe I was his first ride along. His parents are both with EPD, and I asked him kind of jokingly, why on earth would you go to EPD since your parents are here? Couldn't you find any other place in the entire country to go? And he said that from what he has seen, he believes that EPD provides the best training and support for a new officer, and he felt more comfortable staying here where he's been seeing firsthand, well, secondhand from his parents, the support that the department provides to the police officers. I told him congratulations. He gave me a quote I can take to the police commission.
All right, we're gonna move along. To the table, welcome back. I just want to acknowledge we have Michael Clues here, and we also have Sergeant Julie Smith back here. I just want to say we appreciate seeing your faces and welcome to the table. We have some special guests. The first would be our police auditor, Leah Pritchard, who is accompanied by Rob Eller, who's an associate police auditor, and also Lindsay Volks, who's an associate police auditor. And Lindsay will be, yeah, and she'll be giving us our annual report, 2022. Yeah, and just for to let things go smoothly, because we only have so much time, and we have another presenter. We're gonna save your questions to ask the presentation, and then we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for having me. It's nice to see some of you in person. At least I'm usually listening and hiking while this meeting is happening. So I appreciate you always being patient with me when you have questions and it takes me a second to catch my breath. So it's nice to see you all in person. And also I was very excited to see Counselor Zelenka's dog. I think that he should be a regular. Just gonna point that out. Holly's got our presentation, and so just a sort of framing of this is our 2022 annual report. Our order of things is we present this to City Council first, and then CRB, and then we come and present it to you all whenever you want us to. So for some of you, this is a little bit old. So Counselor Zelenka and both Allens actually have already seen all of this.
F5.
It's fine. Sorry.
Go
just a
look.
minute.
Oh, no, that's okay. Take your time.
Go look right underneath Sean's name.
Okay, hold on. Hold on,
Yeah.
everybody.
Oh, look at Michael.
Sean's name. Okay,
Michael knows.
No. There you go. Yep.
thank you.
Awesome. There you
Okay,
I didn't know that.
I did not know that either.
Roller.
Okay, so we can go to the next slide.
go. After all.
Okay, hold on.
That was my talk.
And
Just a
Oh
second. It said-
my gosh.
Since Zoom quit unexpectedly.
That's interesting.
Can everybody hear us or see us at home?
I can.
Oh, good. Okay.
Okay, all right, okay, we're good, okay.
So our
yeah, I knew she was gonna do this.
Our mission at the police auditor's office is to provide an accessible, safe, impartial, and responsive intake system for complaints and accommodations about EPD employees to ensure accountability, fairness, transparency, and trust in the complaint system, and to support and staff the CRB. And this is from both the city charter and the city ordinance that is the implementation for the charter provision.
Presentation, is that what you wanted?
You can't see the
You
presentation?
can't see the presentation?
No, we can see you, but we can't see the presentation.
Okay, hold on.
Give us a second.
Give us a second here. Screen. Okay, just a second. I'm gonna back out.
Do you want me to talk while you're doing it?
Yeah, if
Okay.
you.
Yeah, I can do that.
And then,
So just a quick sort of overview of oversight in Eugene, why we have it, how long we've had it. In 2005, a charter amendment was passed. 75% of the voters voted in favor of implementing civilian oversight in Eugene and having that as a part of the city charter. It's section 15-A, if you're ever hanging out looking at the charter. So in 2006, the auditor's office was established. In 2007, so the civilian review board was established. And then
Sorry,
there
we're
was
seeing
a-
somebody's email, just so you know.
Oh, great.
Can you see the slideshow now?
No, you, like the owl thing or whatever. So it looks like you did open one of the windows, so you just have to click on the correct window because you were in the email window.
And then when you, after those go away, when you share your screen. Oh my gosh, hold on, everybody, just a
You're doing
second.
fine.
No, when you share.
Mhm.
it should- let's share. Can you see that now?
No, it's still you. It's the owl.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead. I think it's the owl is taking over our screen here. The owl is our system.
Yes, yeah, just.
It's okay, you know. Well, I mean, it'd be better.
Can you just point the owl at the at the screen, your screen? I don't know.
Okay. Leah, do you want to
Yeah,
continue
I'll
on?
keep going.
And
I
I'm gonna
apologize.
try to hunt here, okay?
Yeah.
Just hang tight, everybody. No worries.
Does that work?
Oh, can you guys see that with the owl pointing to the screen?
Yeah, we see the it pointing at the ceiling and
The camera's on the slide.
to one of you.
Stood next to it, it might look out. I can try that. I don't know.
Yes, it's certainly looking at you, not the.
I mean.
I think yeah, I think it likes to look at people, so it's like turning slowly towards people.
Experience. All right. Did that age me? I feel like
Can you
it did. All right,
guys
can you,
see-
is it looking at me now, Bonnie?
It's looking at you, but it's not it hasn't made it big enough so that people can actually see the screen very well.
I appreciate the feedback. Okay, then I'm gonna sit down again because that's silly.
Does everyone have their packet available to them?
I
at
have it
home?
available, like I don't need it. I don't know
Okay.
if like for the recording purposes, like if you wanted it to be available for everybody else to see.
Yeah, it is as part of the archive, so it is publicly available whether or not we can get this to work. But to get this to work, what we need to do, Holly, you need to pull it up on your computer and then just share your screen. So make sure make sure it's up first.
I think, yeah, I did do that. I think it has to do with the owl camera and just, I let Dallas know that I purchased a new webcam because of this and it hasn't come in yet. So I do apologize, everybody, but
Okay.
we're gonna have to
Yeah.
just keep
This will be fine.
moving forward.
Okay,
Everything.
yeah.
Yeah, all of the figures are in our annual report, so, and I've actually got that too, so I'll try to refer to like page numbers and things like that, so we can
That'd be
just,
perfect. Thank
I mean, I'll do my best. Bear with me, everyone. I don't do things on the fly, ever, just so you know. Okay, so, in 2009, there was an amendment to the ordinance, basically ensuring, the auditor's access to police files, which is pretty significantly important to our success as an office. So, basically, there's three sort of prongs to oversight of the police. There's police commission, which is a proactive, looking at policies, reviewing policies before really complaints happen, right? And then there's the auditor's office and the civilian review board. The auditor's office is professional staff who are independent of the rest of city government, report directly to city council. We oversee the investigations of all police employees, that's sworn and non-sworn employees. And our independence, our funding, and our access are all protected under city code, which is pretty vital to our success as an office. I've seen a lot of offices do well and do less well, and I think those three things are pretty important to why we've been able to be successful for so long. The civilian review board is appointed by council with 7 volunteers. Alan is one of them. Thank you, Alan. They review closed investigations of complaints involving sworn officers only, so they would not review a complaint with a non-sworn employee. They have access to the entire investigative file. We give them everything, body worn camera, dispatch records, radio traffic, whatever investigation and relevant they get to look at, and they evaluate my work and the work of internal affairs. I want to mention here, we share a database with internal affairs. So some of our numbers, when Cindy comes up next, our numbers may look slightly different. That's just because some things are closed when I make a report and then they close later when she makes her report. There is no obfuscation going on. It's all the same database. We all have the same data that we're pulling this report from. And I think that's all the notes I've got on that page. Specifying defense, we don't need to do that. So the functions of the Office of the Police Auditor are complaint intake, classification of complaints. So we decide how it gets routed, who's going to sort of the level of seriousness of the complaints. And I'm going to talk about that again in a second with a flow chart that's in the report. So I'll refer to that. We monitor investigations, we make recommendations on adjudication, so how the investigation should be, the findings of the investigation, right? Whether the thing alleged happened or not. We do make recommendations on policy and training. So, and they're directly related to the complaints that we see, right? So, it's a little different than what the work that you all are doing with policy. We report back to the community and we support the Civilian Review Board. So gonna try to do the coordinating thing now. So in 2022, we had 262 complaints that were investigated. We had 71 complaints that were dismissed. That was a total of 335 complaints that came through our office last year, and that is on page 5 of the report. We also review all reportable uses of force and also vehicle pursuits. So in 2022, there are 159 reportable uses of force and 10 vehicle pursuits. I'll come back to that. There have been 13 pursuits so far this year, so that's definitely something that we're taking a close look at, and hopefully we'll have more to talk about at some time. So the reasons we would dismiss a complaint are set out in the city ordinance. If they're outside of our jurisdiction, so they don't involve any PD employee, we get complaints about Springfield or UOPD or someone else. Not timely as defined in city code. So code requires that complaints of minor misconduct come in within 60 days and major misconduct within 6 months, unless there's good cause for that delay. If we can't identify the employee, that's rare. We work really closely with IA to identify the employees, and they are amazing. If we just know sort of date and time and general location, we can figure out who was involved. It's big kudos for the IA staff, although Cindy is not in the room right now, but I'll say it again when she's back. And then if there's an alternate remedy, so if someone comes to us and there's a complaint that would be better resolved at a court level, like they said I was speeding and I wasn't, that's something that the court is supposed to decide, not us, right? So that's sort of the general overview of what we look at and what we don't. And then let's go over the flow chart, which is on page 7. So that describes how the complaints can sort of get processed through our office. Minor misconduct issues would go to service complaints or policy complaints. A policy complaint would be where the complaint is about the policy, right? So it's or practice. So it's one of the most frequent ones is there was a car accident and no one came because there wasn't an injury, and that's a practice. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. That's a practice that there's just not enough officers to go to non-injury accidents. So so that's one of those things where it's not like anybody did anything wrong, it's just the person has an issue with the policy. That would go to an EPD supervisor. They contact the reporting party. They contact the person involved. If there was an employee involved, they write a memo. We take a look at that, and if there's something else that reasonably should have been done, we can ask them to do it. But for the most part, sergeants over here have been dealing with these for a very long time. We have a pretty active community as far as complaints go, so everybody knows what's expected, and they get handled pretty well. The next level up would be, well, a different level, I guess, would be an inquiry where it's more of a question of like, I saw this thing and I just didn't understand what was happening and I want to know more because it might have been something wrong, but they don't know. So that often happens related to like uses of force. If people hear use of force, they're like, I don't know what was going on here. And so similarly, that would go to a EPD supervisor. They take a look at it. If they see something that does look like misconduct, they let us know and we can reclassify. But otherwise it would follow a similar route where they talk to the reporting party, they talk to the employee and get to a resolution. Incident review is kind of a placeholder spot. It's where we put things that sound like they could be really bad, but we need to know more before we launch a full IA investigation. Those would go to an IA investigator and they report back to us on what they find. At that point, it can get closed out as an incident review if there wasn't any misconduct. If there was, then it would get reclassified up to an allegation of misconduct, which is known as a blue folder. So if you hear any of us sort of slip into a blue folder, it's an allegation of misconduct. Those are investigated by an IA investigator. We work closely with them to make sure that all reasonable investigative steps are taken. We participate in interviews with employees, with witnesses. We talk about questions beforehand. We collaborate a lot on those. They write up an investigative report that goes to us and also to the EPD chain of command. At that point, we each write memos to the chiefs saying, I think this happened and was a violation of policy or not. And we also talk to each other to see if we agree beforehand. And then it goes to the chief, and the chief has final adjudication authority. There's also allegations of criminal conduct. Obviously, those would be something that would be criminal. We talk about who would be the best person to investigate those. Often it's an outside agency. We are not involved in that criminal investigation because we don't have that level of authority. But it's done by another agency. Well, it's done by usually another agency. They let us know what they find. We collaborate on how to handle those as well. Any questions? Wait, sorry, we'll do questions at the end. I forgot. Okay, so 2022. When you look at, so when we get a complaint, it often alleges several things that could be an issue, right? And typically with the service complaint, it's one thing. But with an allegation of misconduct, they could complain about use of force. And when we look at it, we find there was actually maybe a constitutional rights violation, or there was a courtesy violation or judgment or something else, right? And so that one complaint can turn into several different allegations that need to be investigated. So when we look at the complaints that we received last year, there were 457 specific things that needed to get looked at, right? And so you can see over the course of the last 5 years, 2021 was a peak. That was largely one case that involves a lot of allegations of misconduct. I'm sure I talked about it when I was here last year. But we're still at 457 is still higher than, you know, it represents an increase over time in general. And that's on page 8 of the annual report. Sorry, I'm trying to catch up with both things. And if you look at this, the makeup of the specific allegations, this is on page 10. Most of the specific allegations were related to unsatisfactory performance, judgment, vehicle pursuits. And then we also looked at 3 allegations related to taser use last year. And then I put in what that system, okay? Yes. Matching things up on page 11. You'll see that it was about 19 specific allegations that were sustained. Of those, however many there were. So of the 39 specific ones, 19 were sustained, which is, you know, almost 50%. To me, that says that we tend to not launch an allegation of misconduct investigation unless we're pretty sure that there's something serious there to look at. We also had about 5 that were insufficient evidence, 5 that were still open when we wrote our report, which Cindy's again might be different. You can see within policy, we had 1 that was a probationary termination, 3 that were probationary terminations. And I shouldn't say that like 3, that doesn't mean that 3 employees got terminated. It means that 3 specific allegations resulted in a probationary termination. I know this is really technical and I apologize. Every year it's technical and I do my best. Moving on to criminal allegations. This is on, wow. I don't know what page this is on, I apologize. Just quickly, we had 2 specific allegations related to evidence and property handling. There were 5 specific allegations of criminal conduct last year. Looking at discipline, and this is on page 12. We ended up with 7 employees who received documented counseling for sustained allegations, 2 employees with written reprimand, 2 employees with oral reprimand. 1 employee retired prior to corrective action, and 2 employees received coaching. So that's sort of overview of the statistics, and I'm absolutely happy to answer questions on all of those, but I want to just go over sort of more general items really quick, and then I'll be open to questions. 2022, I finally got staff on board. It was very exciting. Rob Eller and Lindsay Foltz are fantastic. They have really stepped up. We did successful onboarding and training of both of them. They carried really the lion's share of the day-to-day work, and I'm extremely grateful because 2021 was rough. So that's been fantastic. We've supported the Civilian Review Board through 9 meetings. They reviewed 14 cases. Tons of community outreach. That's all listed in the annual report. That's Beatrice from our office, and she is amazing. I'm just, my team is fantastic, and I will rant positively about them all the day. They're just fantastic. We also did procurement of a new public portal for our website. So if you go to our website now, it used to be this old form from like 2007 that wasn't very just wasn't very helpful for folks to file complaints. And so now we have a public portal that went online actually this calendar year, where significantly, if someone wants to file an anonymous complaint, we can now communicate with them back about that anonymous complaint, whereas before it would just, they would file it and we often didn't have a way of letting them know how that got resolved. So people can submit video, they can submit photos, they can be anonymous or not, they can check the status of their complaint. So that has been a significant increase in our ability to be accessible and responsive to the community. Super happy about that. And then we also relocated our office last year so we could be a little more safe, more accessible. We were out on the ground floor at 800 Olive, and now we're in an office building. Some of the feedback we had received was, people didn't really want to be seen going into the auditor's office. So now, we're on the 2nd floor of an office building and you could be going anywhere in there, but we're at 101 East Broadway, Suite 230. But it's been a nice change. This year and next year, we're focusing more on accessibility, continuing to focus on that accessibility piece for upgrading our website. So it's a little more informative. And we're working on a DEI audit of our processes. Right now, we're planning to work with the Office of Equity and Community Engagement on that through the city. Continue to deliver on our core competencies of complaints, intakes, investigations, all of those things. Continue to work on our outreach. And then we're continuing to collaborate with the police department. We work together we're going to be working on protocol updates. I'm not going to go into the nitty-gritty on that unless you ask me to. But I went to council and they supported us to try to update the protocols that have basically been in place since 2007. So it's just sort of the details of how we do things. So we're working on all of that. And then in conclusion, I have gratitude for you fine folks for all the work that you do, for the good discussions and questions that you have, and for, again, being patient with me when it takes me a while to find my unmute button. Mayor and council are always supportive of our work and the work of CRB, and the CRB for showing up, and they have a lot of homework. I am grateful to them for always doing it. So that is that. I mean, I have a little more information on the CRB stuff, but I've been focusing on the auditor's annual report. So I think I can take questions now.
Do we have any questions?
I have questions,
Yes.
Chair.
Yeah, go ahead. And then Commissioner Lumen next. Go
Okay.
ahead.
My first question was regarding the criminal conduct. How do you determine whether that's investigated within EPD or by an external agency?
I determine that.
Yeah.
That's 100% within my purview to
Yeah.
determine who does a criminal investigation.
I think we are kept in the loop, which
Yeah,
we
we
appreciate.
certainly collaborate on that, but in order for us to do a criminal investigation outside the agency, it comes with my specific request to the other department head. So I have to make those requests.
And what criteria do you use when making that determination?
I start with the assumption that it needs to go outside 100% of the time until I get talked into not going outside. And some of it is really determined based on the severity. There's some lower level criminal complaints that I would not feel like we would be in jeopardy if we did the criminal investigation internally, but I start with the lens that I would send all criminal investigations externally. The challenge with that, and the way I've always kind of balanced it, is I don't want to lean on my partners so heavily that I wear out my welcome. And I want to make sure I give them things that are that we have a really good indication of the criminal conduct that they can kind of sink their teeth in and do. What I don't want to do is to access somebody else's resources to find out that it was just frivolous.
Yeah.
And that they're, you know, I want to make sure that they're willing to do that work, because they can deny that. There's no obligation for them to help us out. And by statute, if the ultimate goal around accountability is that if an officer engages in criminal conduct and we think the outcome should be prosecution, then the investigation needs to be done by a public safety officer before any district attorney's office or municipal court or whoever the jurisdiction, whoever the judiciary is, will take that on. And so I'm a little bit careful about how I use that resource.
I think we are fortunate also in that our internal affairs sergeants rotate through the office and then are back out in the department, right? So we have folks who are, you know, elsewhere in the department who know what an IA investigation looks like, right? And so I think that's something that we talk about as well, as far as, you know, we know people who understand the requirements that this would need to have.
Yeah, there's some of these that on the surface here, you would say, okay, based on what we know, if true, it could be a crime.
Yeah.
But we just don't know. And so some of this starts with us to do a little bit of fact finding to see if we actually have what we think we have. And then ultimately we can transition that as well. Others may be, we have pieces of information to suggest that this is more likely than not going down a really bad path. And so that he would immediately find out. So it really is on kind of a case by case basis.
And we're lucky to not get a whole lot.
Yeah, not very many often.
You got any more questions?
I do, but since we got that email about the Roberts rules, I feel like I should save the next one. So I will turn over to other folks with questions.
Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair. One comment and then one question for the auditor's office. So Chief Skinner brought it up, and that's why I'm commenting on it. One of the things that kind of concerns me a little bit is that so much discretion is in the chief's hands. We are very lucky to have Chief Skinner right now, and I do trust you, Chief Skinner, to make these decisions. But I'm worried about who's going to follow you and who's going to follow you after that. And then there's no. Anyways, it puts way too much pressure on you. I feel for you having to make these decisions, and it also, from my perspective, allows a bit too much discretion, and therefore possible other media coming in and just not making our city look good. So just something that came up from that last one. And then for the city auditor, just so I can better understand, can I use that real world example of what happened 2 months ago with the jail guard using the flashlight as a blunt force as an example, just to see how that would go through the matrix? So all we got was, we received an email that someone on jail staff used a flashlight as a blunt force instrument, and that was complained about, and it was not sustained. And I was just wondering, like which track did that go through? What decisions were made along those lines? And does the police policy that we're sitting here talking about apply when it comes to that, or is that solely up to discretion? Thank you.
If it was at the jail, it was either Lane County Sheriff's or Springfield, because EPD doesn't have a jail, and so EPD doesn't staff a jail. So if that would have come to us, and we have definitely received complaints about treatment at the jail, but those aren't employees who we have jurisdiction over. So what we do is we have to dismiss because it's not our jurisdiction, and then we let them know who they can contact at Lane County Sheriff's or the whatever applicable agency it is, who does internal investigations over there.
And then it just comes to us as sustained without understanding quite why.
Well, I don't know how that would have been looked at Lane County Sheriff's. None of our neighboring agencies have civilian oversight. EPD is the only one who has civilians looking at all of this stuff. So I could tell you, like, hypothetically, if a complaint comes to us about use of force, like, it goes to an allegation of misconduct, it gets investigated by, well, typically it would, unless we could obviously see that it was a constitutional use of force. But if it looks like excessive or possibly excessive, it'll get investigated fully, with our participation. The chief would adjudicate it. Once it's closed, the CRB could look at it. So there's a whole lot of steps that could be taken if that complaint was about EPD. But my understanding from what you're saying is if it was the jail, it wasn't something that we looked at.
And that's
Does
to
that
my
make sense?
understanding. I think it was 2 months ago that I read that, so I was just trying to use, but thank you for bringing that up, because that also ties into my concerns about mutual aid and which policies are going to be enforced in which jurisdictions. So thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation today. I appreciate you.
Commissioner Webb?
Leah, I was zoning in on that graph on page 1, and I was kind of wondering if you could shed some light on why you think there weren't any allegations of criminal conduct between the span of 2020 to 2022. I mean, why there were and then not in previous years. Obviously that's a good thing that we didn't have any criminal conduct, misconduct, complaint of criminal conduct allegations in those previous years. But I'm just kind of curious, if it wasn't just recorded, or what happened. Shed your light on that.
I mean, I've been doing this since 2010, and anecdotally, we usually have maybe 1, maybe 5, and it's hard to, I think I know which graph you're talking about.
Yeah, it's on page 1, and it's the classification type and value 5-year trend.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. I think it's actually just that it was so small that you actually can't see it, but I think that my memory is that there were probably at least 2 or 3 those previous years. There was sort of an increase in 2021. Again, there were a couple of cases with more than one criminal allegation related to them in 21, and so it looks more dramatic, I think, than what my memory is that it was. Does that make sense? And I could look back at those numbers for you and report them specifically, like how many of each we had. They're all in the previous annual reports, but luckily I forget some things over time.
Yeah, that would be really great. And then second part of my question is, and why do you think there was a spike in 2021 for service complaint, inquiries, allegations, etc. But there was a decline or decrease in let me see, in the orange section and the blue. So that's the police policy complaint and allegations of criminal conduct. Sorry. It's just policy complaint that had a decline, which is awesome. But why did the other ones go up?
Sure.
Do you know? Is there any?
Well, it's interesting
Any
because
catalyst to that, or?
Yeah, well, and I think it's interesting. I would love to sort of develop we hired a social scientist, so we can do more with statistics reporting. But so in 2021, if you'll look, we had a decrease in overall complaints in 21. And then when you look at that graph that you're looking at, my reading of that is actually that the spike in the yellow makes it look like there's a spike in the blue and the green. And that spike in the yellow was largely attributed to one case where there were something along the lines of about 30 specific allegations that we looked at. And so that then raised up the blue and the green. Does that make sense at all?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So
So one thing to make note of in this is sometimes we have a tendency to conflate these numbers with being numbers of police officers.
Sure.
So one officer could be attributed to 30 of these complaints, which is exactly what happened there. So
Yeah.
it's just, what's that? Sergeant. Sergeant, sorry, not officer. I apologize, Officer Clues. I didn't want to disparage the officer rank. It was a sergeant, which made it even worse in my mind, by the way. But yeah, sometimes we forget when we see these numbers, we try to, we look at them, sometimes we think about that as a number of officers that
Exactly.
are doing things that we don't want them to do. And oftentimes it's the actual complaints.
Yeah.
Then I would recommend that, you put in a little blurb explaining exactly what Chief just said. That way, when somebody looking at that graph would then look at that little blurb underneath it and understand it a little better, because for someone who's not involved in making these graphs, I don't understand it as much. That's why I ask, and I'm glad that I got, both of you to chime in on this. So thank you.
Thank you. That's a good question.
Commissioner Dominguez and then Commissioner Lehman.
Yes. 1 second. Okay, so my question is, what is entailed in a supervisor review of a policy complaint? Do they touch the policy, change the policy? What is their interaction with the policy?
No, they wouldn't, well, no, well, and actually Julie could probably, Julie ends up with a lot of them.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I do get policy complaints, and so I look through the complaint. I review all the reports and the data, the facts that come with the complaint, and then based on what I see in the facts, determine whether there was a policy violation or not. And then I contact the complainant and discuss their concerns, and then I'll adjudicate and write a memo about it.
Oh, so you guys are in that case, or how does that work? Sorry, it just in the report it says that the supervisor reviews the policy complaint. So what's your relationship with the supervisor? Or are you the supervisor?
Julie's the supervisor.
I am a supervisor. I am a sergeant. And so I do review some policy complaints and then adjudicate them. And if I can think of at least one in the last 2 years that we actually looked at the policy and said we need to adjust the policy based on the complaint.
Wait, am I allowed to ask another question or not?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, and then my other question is, I guess I'm wondering, how are officers usually identified in most cases? Like, why were the officers not identifiable in the cases where they were not? And in how many of those cases were the employees, like, were you provided with imagery in order to identify them? I guess I'm just kind of wondering about that because I've talked about DP numbers before. So.
Oh, yeah, and I would have to look and see if we actually had any that were dismissed because the employee wasn't identified last year. That's one of the reasons we can dismiss, but I'm actually not sure if we had any of those. I would have to look if it's in the numbers. You look like you're looking for the numbers, so let me know if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I think you said there were a couple in here, but you it sounded like a handful, but it wasn't an exact number.
Yeah, we definitely, we had overall, we had 71 complaints dismissed. And then there were the reasons that we could dismiss them. And there definitely may have been some employee not identifiable. I will say, like, typically what happens with those is it's more like often the complaint is about a car, right? And so I saw a car run a stop sign, for instance, right? And so it's if they didn't get a car number or we don't have a specific, and honestly, even if we have a specific time and location without a car number, we could still probably figure it out. But if someone is just saying, I saw a car, they ran a stop sign and they don't tell us, where it was or what time or identifying information of that, then there's not a lot we can do. We can say, yep, that sounds like an EPD car. I don't know who it was.
So it's usually a car thing and it's not usually that they're not identifiable as like walking around officers or like actually.
Right,
people.
yeah.
How do they get identified when they're walking around? I guess I'm wondering like how do you normally see?
Well, typically, so what happens is the complaint comes into us and then we check in with the IA staff and we say, okay, we have this complaint. It happened at this location at about this time, they say that this happened. And then Rick is great. And Rick and I, well, Cindy is great too, but Rick is great. And she tells Rick what to do. So Rick finds the video, or like he goes through, like you can look at dispatch records, you can figure out who was dispatched to a call at that place at that time, right? Who are all of the officers. He pulls all of the video for us, all of the reports if we ask for it, all of the dispatch records, all of that, and shares it with us basically through our database or through our shared drives. And then we can look at that and say, okay, so this complaint was specifically about like this conduct or this behavior, and then we can figure out who that was in that group, or if it's the overall group that was the complaint, right? We can name who was there. Does that help?
I'm just I guess my question goes back to something that we talked about a while ago with like the DPSST numbers and them being identifiable and not all officers choosing to wear them. And I guess I'm wondering like how useful that has been, if at all, that they have the numbers, like those that do have it, like how useful that is, if at all. But of course, those are probably the ones that don't mind. And never mind.
I can speak to that. So remember, when we're talking about identifiable numbers or descriptors, that was specifically in the context of crowd control, not day-to-day operations. So there's so there's no obligation for us to have our DPSST numbers visible on day in and day out. Now, some of them do, because if they're involved in crowd control, it'll be on the back of their load-bearing vests that they wear. But that legislative initiative was specifically around crowd control, and specifically because so many different times crowd control involves a variety of different agencies that are doing this work. And so every single one of the officers has a name tag on. Oftentimes we know the last name because they catch the last name. CAD and dispatch records will identify, and as a last resort or as a complementary piece, we have some AVL data to suggest where the officer was at what time. And so it's quite a bit of investigative work that happens in IA and the auditor's office to help us identify that. And like Leah said, I'm not sure there's been many instances we haven't figured out who the subject officer might have been that's the subject of that complaint. So
I just wonder if, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that, and in the last, sort of large scale, right, demonstration complaint that we had in 2020, when there was specific behavior that was complained about, there was so much video that we were typically able to figure out by video who the person, like who the complaint was about, even in that case. And that was, even before the legislative change. So I don't know if that helps, but that's my experience.
Yeah, it does help. I guess all I'm getting at is that it sounds like there is a lot of work that goes into identifying an officer. And I think that if people felt comfortable enough to, like, let's say, as I had suggested before, if the DPSST number was big enough, then people could discreetly take pictures and feel comfortable sending them to you. And you wouldn't have to do all that legwork to find out who it was, because they'll provide it for you, because everybody has a camera and they could just take a picture. So I think you could save time if everybody just had that tag on, their day-to-day uniform. That's just what I was suggesting. Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. There's Lehman.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I want to say, as a member of the CRB, I want to compliment both the auditor and internal affairs at EPD that this is a robust, transparent process, that the CRB members get the complete file, and internal affairs does a very thorough job, and the auditor's office then does a thorough job, and it's all kind of put out on the table. And that's really important. There is one weakness, and I bring this up at CRB and I bring it up here because I think it kind of riffs a little bit on Commissioner Lemon's comment when there is discretion in the chief. And in this great, robust, transparent process, the one weakness is discipline. And we'll be examining discipline on this commission as part of our work plan. And because of the contract, the union contract, it's not on the table for the auditor, for CRB, for the auditor. It's in the chief's hands. And I totally agree with Commissioner Lemons, that our chief, there's no reason to suspect that discipline isn't getting meted out in a proper or proportional way, but when you look and you say in 2022, you look at page 12 and you look at the allegations, and what happened was counseling and reprimands, and no one got suspended. A couple people's probation got terminated, and that's fine. It could be, we look at conduct, but we don't, on CRB, we look at all this conduct, but we don't see what happens. And then at the end, we see a statistic and you kind of put oh, was it this person that got this? Or, and the only thing I want to say is that we hear so much about regular working people, like getting sent home for half a day or a day for discipline things. I represent employees that work at sawmills and places, and this is the calls I get of people. And so you just have to ask, like, this is really serious stuff. And when these complaints are sustained and it's just counseling or it's just the reprimand, it could have repercussions for careers and for promotions. It's not a nothing burger. But I think just when council examines this process, when we examine the discipline metric, which I think is what is on our work plan, I just hope that commissioners are mindful, and if there's solutions, I mean, the process is really solid and really good. And I just see this, it's not that I'm saying that it is, there could be a time when there's all this robust process, but then nothing conduct is not punished in a commensurate way that, and I don't have any belief that that's happening, but I think from the process standpoint, it's a weakness. Thank you. Thanks.
Can I just, I just want to always take an opportunity to articulate kind of a greater landscape, especially around this issue, notwithstanding the weakness of not knowing the discipline, some of the other things that are in play when we think about discipline that often come to the table and what people often don't realize when discipline is being determined is that it's not just kind of an arbitrary decision on my part or any chief's part to do that. We're guided, at least in the city of Eugene. What I can assure people of is that anytime discipline is administered, it is measured against other similar behavior that's happened in the city and what that discipline has warranted, and the issue of fairness and consistency. And then more specifically with the employee relation board and other arbitrary rulings that we see in our profession statewide, what other behavior or similar types of conduct, what that has warranted through kind of case law and arbitrary or arbiters' decisions, what has been seen to be just and reasonable. We certainly measured against that because there is some vulnerability for us as an organization to step well outside of that consistency, and then downstream there's some legal recourse that puts the city in jeopardy if we're not at least trying to be consistent with what we see in other similar situations. Now, that speaks maybe to a broader systemic issue as to whether or not as a state or as a profession on the West Coast, whether we're where we need to be. But understand in this landscape, it's not me just kind of spinning the wheel in my office. I'm certainly wanting to be consistent with what we see happening with not only our other employees within the city of Eugene, there's 1,600 of them. And as you imagine, there's probably similar types of behavior that's happening within the city. And then what we're seeing with our law enforcement professionals statewide.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
I'll add to the voices expressing support and trust for our current chief. I'm a little bit concerned by your statement as far as measuring the discipline against other standards that have been set or similar scenarios. It really feels like what's the status quo kind of scenario. And as our times are changing, I think that this presents an excellent opportunity to ensure that there is a discipline matrix. And I know that word is not popular and the terminology and the approach to it, but I hate seeing one person having that much control, power, liability, risk. So I'll state that. And this may be a question for you or Leah, regarding the issues of it, as far as the disciplinary actions, can you define the oral reprimand and how are these, the written reprimand and the oral reprimand, how are they reported if they're not documented, because there was a separate category for documented written reprimands.
I need to maybe better understand the question.
Sure.
When you say, how are they reported?
So on page 12, we had the documented counseling, which
Right.
I think makes sense, and then we have the written reprimand and the oral reprimand. Are the written and oral reprimands also documented? I'm
When you say
supposing they are,
documented,
since they're
You
reported.
mean documented like in a personnel file? Or is that what you mean when you say documented? I guess that's.
Okay, that's actually a great place to start. How do you define documented?
So I would define document as being a notation that we document in somebody's personnel records that they received this level of discipline.
Okay,
And so written and oral reprimand, I think, have different retention cycles or retention schedules.
They're just a different level
Yeah.
of discipline. So, and I have it in my presentation, but I can go over it with you now if you like.
Well, you're gonna have to, so these guys can hear it. You wanna do that?
Right, yeah, she'll be coming down.
Yeah.
So why don't we,
We'll get you
why don't you bring that back up when she's back?
okay, thank you.
Why don't we go next to Commissioner Lemon?
Thank you, Chair. And quite honestly, I'm just going to be seconding most of what Vice Chair Hawkins just said. So yeah, just contrary with past behavior, I don't see that as sufficient. We are moving forward in society, or at least I would hope we are. Eugene is certainly doing so. But as society grows and learns, I just think about like what was going on in the 60s. Well, if we're referencing the 60s just to cover our butts from a legal situation, then that's not appropriate from my stance. And then on the discipline matrix, which I know is not a popular thing, but it takes it, it takes the subjectivity out of it, makes it more objective, also would increase the trust and set appropriate expectations with our fellow citizens. Thank you.
And
Yes.
I'm sorry, you guys keep getting me going here. I want to remind the commission and anybody that's willing to listen, the whole purpose of having an accountability mechanism in my mind is to hold people accountable and try to change behavior. Why would we not entertain a variety of creative ways to impose discipline if we felt like it was going to change behavior? It's not a one size fits all type of mentality. So I do enjoy the discretion of being able to identify based on what has happened. Now, certainly there's some things that are so egregious that it would result in termination, suspension, those types of things. And I have leaned in heavily on that. But there have been other instances where maybe someone else in similar situation got a written reprimand. And I enjoy the opportunity to find creative ways to change people's behavior by doing things other than just being stuck in this discipline matrix that my only tools for accountability are counseling, oral reprimand, written reprimand. There's just so many other opportunities to do that. And ultimately that's my goal, is to hold people accountable and make sure the behavior doesn't happen again and actually change behavior. And I've actually seen, since in my 33 years of doing this job, instances where just following a strict disciplinary matrix does not get the employees' attention. And I know Leah has seen that, where we've seen this over and over again, and we have progressive discipline. And we get through this thing where it's like, well, we started with documented counseling. Okay, next time it's oral reprimand, next time it's written reprimand. I mean, instead of seeing this employee over and over again and going through this kind of, this ascension of the discipline ladder, I like to have the ability to jump steps and be able to get some attention or do something creative. So I know there's a lot of trust in that statement by all of you and me. And I hear from people all the time, well, this officer right here tells me all the time, well, I trust you, but what about the next person? So he can appreciate that comment when he's worried about how we do that. So.
Yeah.
One thing.
Can I respond?
Yes.
Okay, so as a fellow supervisor, like I absolutely 100% agree that when it comes to discipline, flexibility is necessary. But I happen to be a supervisor in a very different field than the Eugene Police Department. EPD is different as they represent the city and oversee safety within the public. So I think we got to strike that balance, between flexibility and discretion when it comes to supervisor, but also the public knowing exactly what's expected and what's going to happen. So thank you for your comments there, Chief, and I appreciate you.
We're gonna go Clues, then Commissioner Shivers.
The one statistic that I would be very interested in is how many times do the same officers come back?
Yeah.
Because being the one that sits next to him doing most of these internal affairs investigations, I can tell you, regardless of level of corrective action, by the way, I prefer corrective action versus discipline, my mom and dad discipline. Everybody, my employer can change behavior and correct my action. But being the one sitting next to them, it's never the same people. And if it is the same person, it's never for the same issue. So you can say, I want to drop the hammer, I want to do this, I want to do that. I hear you and I get it. I understand in concept what you're trying to get at. But if you want to use the parenting approach, do you have to give your child a spanking every single time? Or if you give them that mom or dad look and they stop, isn't that ultimately what you're trying to get at? And that's the one statistic that maybe it's in Cindy's presentation that I don't see in there, is how often do the same people come back for the same issues? Because I know it's not.
And I agree that we should absolutely be tracking that. And it's not like we're trying to be parents, the city, the chief. No one's trying to be parents, but we are absolutely trying to make sure that things go well and that, public servants and the public understand and have an agreement between each other. So we are not being in a parental role. So I just took objection to that and I'll shut up. Thank you.
Commissioner Shivers? Can't hear you. Unmute.
Thank you. I was double muted by accident. So there's been two sort of main themes that I've heard throughout this. The one that I think I most philosophically agree with, right, is that when we have consistency as part of the matrix for discipline, we end up shackled to a past that we may or may not agree with. Provided we don't move forward methodically, right? So if we only ever disciplined people the way they have been disciplined before, we will never make progress. But that's frankly not what's happening. It is I admit, slower process than I personally would like oftentimes. But part of the reason for that is not because anybody in this room or in this department is choosing that. It's because if they don't do that, then they get sued, and there is somebody over chief's head, right? Like the court of law and the employment lawyers. If things are not consistent, then people get off more often than they should. Whereas if we ramp discipline up in ways that are consistent and progressive, we have the opportunity to change things over time and reset what benchmarks we're working off of. So it's very frustrating, I think, for all of us, not just as commissioners, but also as chief, and also as a department. I don't want to speak too much for them, but I think since we're all working in the same direction, we have, I think we've built trust, and it's good to rely on that. Which leads me to the next major theme that I've seen throughout this discussion, which is, what about the next chief? Which I also firmly agree with. To me, it sounds like the major concern is that the next chief may or may not use their discretion in ways that we don't like, frankly. And there's sort of two solutions to this that I see, neither of which are at this table. The first solution is to make sure that when this chief leaves, we stay engaged and involved in the process for selecting the next one. that's not like a silver bullet, right? That requires a lot of work. Picking the best person for the job and making sure that the next chief is not who we fear they might be, requires work up front. It requires work throughout the process, and it's not easy. And the next solution, which is also not at this table, is strengthening our mayoral system. Chief ultimately answers to the city manager, who ultimately answers to the mayor and city council. But with a weak mayoral system, as we have now, those processes are slower than many people might like, and the accountability is not what some of us might desire. So the solution for that is having a stronger mayoral system where an elected official is the final arbiter of the whole process, rather than just the oversight for the city manager. The reason I bring this up is not to get us sidetracked, but it's to say that we can do things, and it goes beyond this table, and that's not a reason to despair.
Okay,
I just said,
go ahead. She has a question.
this doesn't come up ever, so that's why I don't report on it, but there is a separate process for complaints about a future chief, not this, no, just kidding. There, it is for the chief, just to be clear for anybody watching, auditor's office doesn't have jurisdiction over, the chief. There's a process for the city manager and everyone to do that, and I never talk about it because it doesn't really happen. Thank you for that. And then the other, thing I just wanted to mention, something that I really appreciate about working with Michael and working with the chief and with most of the people who I work with over here, is that I see us all as really aligned on the outcome, which is the change behavior, the improved police service, improved community trust. We may disagree on how to get there, and the tools that we have are different in how to get there, but I really appreciate that I can have philosophical discussions with you about, was this a mistake of the head or a mistake of the heart, and how do we actually achieve a better result in the future from this person, right? So I don't have input into the discipline, but I think that even how we go about the investigation and the IA process can have an influence into that, and that's where I do have some authority. So I don't know, I think it's just important for everyone to know, both in this group and in the community, that those are discussions that are happening constantly. We have those all the time about how do we actually just make that better overall.
Chair Boggs, can I just put an exclamation point on that?
Yeah.
Because that's a great, I'll be done. This commission and other entities that are looking at police oversight spend an awful lot of time thinking about accountability and corrective action. They spend a lot of time thinking that that's the silver bullet for trust. And one of the things that, and you and I, Leah and I have talked about this a lot, the one thing that has a tendency to be abandoned is, what do we do about reconciliation? Where you build trust is where you reconcile the harm that's happened, community harm reduction types of strategies. And oftentimes we spend a lot of time talking about how we discipline or have corrective action on a police officer, and be able to be transparent and show this community, we did X to this officer after they did Y, without any reconciliation or opportunity to come back and build the public trust. So this commission, I think, is uniquely positioned to talk about not only the mechanism by which we hold people accountable, but also to have really good, robust conversations about, okay, what's the back end of that when it looks like reconciling that with the community. One really great example of that is the conversations we're having now around whether or not there is some use for mediation that should be used between somebody that's complaining or has a complaint on police, and we do the investigation that maybe bringing the parties together to better understand where each other's coming from and understand the uniqueness of the situation actually provides a level of reconciliation and greater understanding. And I think that fosters a greater level of trust.
And that is built one step, like one by one interaction at a time. So I should mention, we are working on bringing back our mediation program. We'll report on that next year.
I'm gonna do one more question with Commissioner Lemons, and then we're going to our next presenter.
Thank you. And this is honestly just a comment in response to Chief Skinner, and I appreciate you so much for being here. I fully agree with you. I have nothing to disagree on your statement. It should be an XYZ approach, not just XY, something happened, corrective action, reconciliation and community and proactive policing, I think is super important. I think reconciliation is a lot harder if we do not outline and the public doesn't know exactly what to expect. So we might actually be able to achieve your goal of reconciliation, Chief Skinner, by having a little more transparency with the discipline matrix. Thank you.
Sounds great. Thank you, Leah, Pitcher for attending our group.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank
And
you.
I may have to switch to remote attendance, but I'm available if anything overlaps with something you still have questions, but thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we'll be having Cindy Coleman, who is AIC for the Office of Professional Standards, and she will be giving us a report. Thank you.
You're welcome. Good evening, everyone. So I assume we're still having technical difficulties. But our folks got their reports handy to if I
Yes.
go over the report. That might be the best way to do it. So again, I just want to introduce myself for folks that don't know me. Cindy Coleman, Professional Standards Manager. I've been in this role for about 3.5 years now. And I have enjoyed working at the department for over 28 years. So I have a depth of experience and have 21 years in IA specifically. And I'm going to go back and forth between my PowerPoint presentation and my report because I don't want to forget anything here.
And again, we're going to be saving our questions till the end of Louisville.
So just to introduce our team for 2022. So this report is again calendar year 2022. So it's a little dated information at this point, but that's the period of time that we're talking about, complaints that came in during that period. And during that period, we had Sergeant Ryan Nelson and Sergeant Joe Peckles as our IA investigators, Rick Weber as our program coordinator, and myself. So a small team in internal affairs. And I think what I'll have you do is, well, just understand that the scope of this report is on Office of Professional Standards, which includes the IA stats, as well as some stats on force response, pursuits, vehicle damage, things like that. We'll also go over briefly on our training and accreditation and those topics as well. So I'm going to jump to the first slide, which would be the slide of the basic statistics for internal affairs. And I don't know, I stepped out of the room. I'm not sure if Leah went over it, but we have 3 basic investigation types. And the way that they're classified by the auditor completely determines what track they're going to take, who's going to investigate them, and whether or not they can lead to discipline. And so the first group is the formal allegations of misconduct and criminal misconduct. The second is incident reviews. And then the third is supervisor actions. Those are the group of complaints that are classified as service complaints, policy complaints, or inquiries by the auditor. And so if you look at the chart, which is on the top of page 6 of the report, you'll see a 5-year comparison trend of those categories. So you'll see last year that we had 16 allegations of misconduct. This is a great segue to let you know that our office reports the numbers slightly different than the auditor's office. So if you see discrepancy, again, we are using the same database, we're just reporting them a little differently. So we had 16 allegations of misconduct, 28 incident reviews, which I will give you a brief description of what that is, because this has been something we added in 2016, and it's been a great tool for the auditor's office and our office to do a preliminary investigation of a case, and it can include any investigative steps short of interviewing the involved employee. And it gives the auditor an opportunity to get some questions answered, get more information to determine whether or not a full IA investigation is required and warranted. Historically, before that, those would typically be blue folders. They'd be a full IA investigation, employees would be notified, and the whole process would go from there. So these have been a great tool to understand the incident better, get it documented, do follow up with the complainants, and close them out as incident reviews. Those are typically assigned to the IA sergeant, but they can be assigned to a lieutenant or someone of equivalent rank in the organization. You'll see that our supervisor actions were 286. So the bulk of the complaints that are coming in through the auditor's office are those that lower level of service level complaint or policy complaints and inquiries. So when you're looking at the chart on the bottom of page 6, we're talking about only now just those 16 cases that were classified as allegations of misconduct or criminal misconduct. And this shows how the auditor's office classified them. And this is a great reminder too, that for when you're talking about the stats that I've got in this report, we've got this, each case could have more than one employee and more than one allegation of misconduct. So for this stat, they only get one sub classification. So it could be a complex case with multiple employees with a combination of, say, use of force or performance or courtesy, but the auditor is going to give a sub classification designation to a case. And that shows here is how in 2022, 38% of those were performance. That was the largest section of that. Our cases involved last year 16 sworn personnel and 2 professional staff. If we go to the top of page 7, you'll see a chart about the dispositions. So again, we're still talking about those 16 cases. And so each case, even though there may be more than one employee and a number of different allegations, they only come back to one case disposition. And if any of the allegations in the case against any of the employees are sustained, it'll be noted as a sustained disposition. So you can see from here, we had 9 sustained cases out of those 16. But to dive in a little deeper, out of those 16 cases, we had 40 different individual allegations that were investigated. And we had 23 sustained last year out of those 40. Page 8, it goes just a little bit of a deeper dive. So it looks at those 40 individual allegations, and it shows you based on the allegation type. So in other words, we have use of force, performance, courtesy, constitutional rights, and conduct. So each allegation type is given a subtype, if you will, and this shows how each of those allegations were adjudicated within that type. And then on page 9, it's an even deeper dive. Page 9 shows the specific policy directive that was alleged to have been violated and how those were adjudicated. Going to page 10, the top of page 10, this is a 5-year look at our sustained complaint rates. So in 2022, this shows that we had the 9 of the complaints of the 16 were internal and 7 were external, but 5 of the internal were sustained and 2 of the external or sustained. So it breaks out the difference of external and internal. Complaints that are initiated by the auditor are considered external too. So it's just internally identified ones would have the internal designation. So that's a 56% system for complaints. Corrective action taken. I do have some updated numbers for you on where the discipline got meted out. And so there were 2 written reprimands, 3 oral reprimands, 5 documented counselings, and 2 coachings. So it takes that one case that had multiple employees maybe and multiple allegations, but the way that my stats show is it still comes down to only one, the employee's only gonna get 1 corrective action for that whole case. Even if they had 36 sustained allegations that resulted in termination, they only get terminated once. They don't get terminated 36 times. So a little difference in how we report that. Going over to the incident reviews on page 11. I know I'm going through this fast. I hope this is okay. Incident reviews are those cases that we talked about that are the preliminary investigation that these are unique in that they can be after the preliminary review by the IA sergeant and reporting back to the auditor their initial findings. The auditor has the ability to reclassify that, and sometimes they reclassify to an allegation of misconduct because they feel an IA really is warranted. We really do need to talk to the employee to better understand what happened. And so that requires either an IA investigation or a reclass to a service complaint. So either of those options are possible and have happened, but this chart shows the ones that actually got closed out as incident reviews. And you can see that there was a split, 36% for performance and conduct. They're kind of a blend there on how they were subclassified. Next, we'll jump over to the supervisor actions. And again, that's that combination of the policy complaints, inquiries, and service complaints. And this just shows the breakdown of how those were classified by the auditor. The next chart just is showing a 5-year trend of the different supervisor actions and how they varied through the years. Fairly consistent, but you'll see that we had quite a few more service complaints in 2022. And that's just that based on how the auditor classifies. There'll be some variations from year to year. Going over to page 13 at the top, you'll just see a breakdown of how the service complaints were classified, because policy complaints and inquiries don't get a subclassification, but service complaints do. That helps us try to understand better where those complaints are what the nature of those complaints are. And you'll see 50% of those were classified as performance by the auditor. At the bottom of the page, it shows the complaint categories. That is something that we added a few years ago to actually try to give us even better information about the nature of complaints and to see if we could track any trends. And the current classifications, or the categories, I should say, are driving, COVID, because we had quite a few complaints we were tracking in 2020, starting in there. Prohibited camping and LEC reporting were the ones that we had for 2022 that were categorized that way. There were, out of the 330 complaints, 31 complaints got categorized. So those are already included in all the other statistics. It's just a further breakdown for us to better understand the nature of complaints. Switching over to page 14, bias-based policing complaints. This is something that they are investigated and received, however they're received. They can come in through the auditor or through a police supervisor may take one. It doesn't matter how they come in. They get documented in IA Pro or Blue Team, investigated, reviewed by the auditor, and when they're when the investigation is complete, I do a report to the state on the bias-based policing complaints that have been made. And this is a chart to show from 2016, when we started this, where those, how those were classified by the auditor. We did not have any community impact cases in 2022, nor did we have any force investigations in 2022. We did have 5 respectful work environment cases. So just a note on that. So one of the things that's also different from the auditor's office is those are different types of investigations. For example, forced investigations are things that we do automatically without any indication that there's been a policy violation. It's just there's for example, an officer involved shooting, we will open a force investigation. So they're a different type of investigation, and they are not included in the main IA stats, but we didn't have any last year. Vehicle crashes and damage. One of the things that's important to note for this is we use the database to track damage to our vehicles for any reason, not just crashes or collisions. So the stats here involve everything from a crash with a citizen vehicle to a citizen damaging a police vehicle by throwing a rock through the windshield. So and the numbers went down slightly from last year. And there's a breakdown in the report of the cause of damage. And also just some comparison on the miles driven, just to put that in perspective of how many miles our fleet vehicles are being driven a year compared to how many incidents of damage that we have. And let's see, vehicle pursuits. This is an interesting area as well. We've had some changes to policy over the years that you're probably pretty familiar with. We had one last year as well. And that, I think that has had an impact on the number of pursuits that we've had in 2022. You can see it went from 3 in 2021 to 10 in 2022. So I think that there's been quite a few in 2023 so far this year. So I think that is something that we'll be paying closer attention to. Let's go through this real quick. One of the 10 pursuits in 2022 was deemed outside policy. It's important to know that when we do have a pursuit that happens, they're entered in our Blue Team database, and they're reviewed by a chain of command, as well as our EVOC supervisor. So someone that is familiar with our training and of the emergency vehicle operations, and they give their assessment, and then the auditor reviews all of these, and IA looks at all of these. And if they're deemed to be outside policy, we'll have a conversation with the auditor about whether or not an IA investigation is warranted. And sometimes it does turn into a separate IA investigation. And sometimes not, but those are looked at on a case-by-case basis to ensure that if we have to do a deeper dive to look at, we will. Force response. So when we say force response, we're talking about our reportable use of force and reportable shows of force. We added the reportable shows of force in 2021, so it's still a fairly new thing that that is being tracked in our database. Like pursuits, it's important to know when we have a use of force, there's a lot of eyes on that. So use of force, a reportable use of force happens. Now the involved officer or officers, they each do an entry into Blue Team documenting the force that they used or the show of force that they used. And then that gets reviewed by their sergeant. Their sergeant will pull video and police reports and if there's any additional information to review, they'll look at that and they'll give a preliminary assessment on whether or not they felt that the use of force was within policy. And then route that through their chain of command. They're also being copied. All of these are copied to our defensive tactics supervisor. The auditor reviews all of these and IA reviews all of these. So a lot of eyes on. If there's one that appears to be outside policy, conversation will happen as to whether or not it's appropriate to initiate an IA on that, or if perhaps it's a training opportunity, performance management potential thing. So, but they are reviewed by a lot of people. And we're looking at not just the individual case, but our defensive tactics team is looking to see if there's any identifiable trends, to see if there needs to be any adjustments to training or potentially even a policy amendment to make it clear what the expectations are around our uses of force. You can see that we had 159 in 2022, which is up slightly from 2021. Our reasons for use of force, the active resistance was 50% of the time was listed as the reason for the force. Attempt to flee was 13% and actually armed was 9%. I'm just going through here. Focus blows and tasers both decreased quite a bit last year. We'll see that we also tracking the taser effectiveness. So we're tracking whether or not, if it wasn't effective, what the reason was. Was it the distance was too far? Did it get caught in the clothing? Was there, in other words, was it disconnected clothing? Those types of things. So the officers are entering that data in when they're entering their use of force. Canines. The use of force by canines decreased last year from 16 to 13. So but that's still higher than we had previous years. And all of the 13 deployments were considered within policy. Active resistance was listed as for six of those 13 instances. Skipping to page 23, our 5-year trend. We picked the 7 most commonly used force types and showed you a 5-year breakdown of how those compare from year to year. And OC spray stayed pretty consistent to last year, but most of the others had a declining trend. Regarding use of force, I think it's good to remind the group that our defensive tactics instructors try to incorporate de-escalation training into everything that officers do, from whether it's just a casual, contact to a preliminary investigation to responding to a call for service. So that is something that is absolutely, we believe, is to be contributing to our numbers going down. we have a lot of new officers too, so we have a lot of, there's that learning, but there's also, everybody's getting that training. I talked a little bit about show of force. Again, this is our reportable shows of force, and this is expected that officers, if they are displaying a firearm, displaying a taser, an extended range impact weapon, or if a canine is used in deterrence, in gaining compliance for a specific individual, then that is expected to be, that's a reportable show of force in the system. And the officer's responsible for entering that in, and that has the same review as a use of force. The overall effective rate for shows of force was 80% in 2022. And the reported or believed armed was the reason shows of force in 24% of the incidents. The arrest data is there to try to illustrate that reportable uses of force only happen in 2% of the arrests that officers are making. So it is comparatively, a small percentage of the time that force is necessary. I'm going to skip to commendations. So commendations have remained fairly steady for the last several years in terms of themes of why citizens are, or the nature of what the commendations are about. And that is typically in a category of officers or employees were tactful, compassionate, caring, patient when interacting with people in vulnerable situations, efficient, professional, thorough when responding to and investigating incidents. The chart just shows that 44 of the commendations listed here were internally generated, but the balance were externally received, and most of them came in through email. We track the source of that. Lessons learned. This is, I think, one of the most important things to share is that every complaint that comes in, regardless of how it's classified, including at-fault vehicle accidents, any of those things, we are trying to capture any lessons learned in terms of, how can we do better? We're not perfect every time, and there's sometimes some things that have kind of risen up, and one of them continues to be driving complaints. And so we continue to try to reinforce how important it is for officers to be cognizant that their driving is being observed by citizens, and citizens are paying attention and they're complaining about that. We encourage them to customer service, answer, return those emails, return those phone calls. This is something that we're seeing a little bit more of. So we're trying to make sure and just do those reminders to our employees that these sort of things are important to our community. Just quickly, this group is very familiar with a lot of the policies and procedures that have been published in 2022, and you reviewed quite a few of them. What's listed in this report was the highlights of the policies and procedures. It's not an exclusive list, but it does show the significant work that Julie has done and others in the department in getting policies updated. The bottom of page 29 shows some specific ones that the police commission assisted the department with reviewing and giving us your feedback and your perspective. So thank you for that. Police accreditation. That is also something under the Office of Professional Standards and something that is Julie Smith is lead on. And we last year completed a 3-year review of accreditation. And the report shows all of the areas in which that our department was reviewed, and we passed. It was great. So we'll have this year, Julie is working actively on compiling the proofs and documentation for the next accreditation cycle, which will be 22, 23, and 24 that we'll report out on in 2025. Quality assurance, that's also in the Office of Professional Standards. That's a staff person who is assigned to the Office of the Chief Professional Standards, but most of her focus is assisting with managing the audits for an inspection of evidence handling, storage, forensics, so the lab, and she's doing a fantastic job with that. So that's another avenue of oversight that the department is doing. And then I also added in the report some highlights from our training team. They're not they're assigned separate from my shop, but I have included their highlights too for you to review. One thing I did want to point out, as for the reference documents that aren't printed on my report, but they're available to you online if you go to the online version, is we do have just some background documentation that hopefully would make this a little bit easier in terms of talks about the categories of complaints, the investigative types, adjudication definitions, and the performance management and discipline terms that you were talking about before, as well as a compilation of all of the IAK summaries. And what I mean by that is that's just the ones classified as allegations of misconduct. Not every service complaint, but the big allegations. So in response to your question, the performance management discipline / corrective action terms are, we have coaching and documented counseling, which are considered pre-disciplinary. But coaching is the one that is used. I would describe that as kind of routine for a supervisor in day-to-day. They'll coach their employee on that, and they should document that in a program, a separate program we have called Make Note. And then documented counseling is, it's basically a warning. It is putting the employee on notice that they violated a policy and what the expectations are. And then the first level of discipline in our organization is oral reprimand, but it is documented. It's still a written memo that goes in an employee's personnel file. And then the second level of that is written reprimand. It's just the distinction of the levels. And then we come into our due process levels of discipline, which require additional steps, which would be suspension, demotion, or termination. Anything that would take a property right away. We have additional steps that we take before actually imposing discipline. That was really fast, sorry. But
No, thank
I
you.
think that's all. Any questions?
Thank you very much. Judge Lehman?
I just want to say, that's the incredible transparency and thoroughness. We are really lucky to live in a city that provides this information. And if you know, I don't think this is unique. I think this is unique. I don't think this is common. This is really comprehensive, and your experience and institutional knowledge of all the years that you've been with the department really show in this report. And, you know, there's a lot to parse, and there could be many things to talk about the specifics, but just as a general statement, I really want to thank you and for providing the public with this information. So thank you.
Do you have any questions from any of the commissioners? Well, if not, we have, thank you very, very much.
You're welcome.
It's been a great presentation to us. All right, next we'll be having closing comments. We'll begin with Vice Chair Hawkins.
Dan, I defer and gather my thoughts for a moment.
Yes,
please.
yeah. Commissioner Dominguez.
Just thank you for the presentations and for answering our questions.
Commissioner Wynn.
I don't have any closing comments. Thank you.
You. Commissioner Shivers.
I hope everybody has a great week, great month till I see you next.
Thank you. Councilor Zelinka.
I don't have any closing comments.
Commissioner Lemons.
Thank you, Chair. You know, I always got something. First of all, just thank you to our presenters. I really appreciate that. It was so thorough, and the amount of data that you're collecting and the way you're presenting it, I really do appreciate. And I super want to shout out the EPD for their de-escalation policies, because we can look at their numbers and we can see that these are working. So I think we are a leader on de-escalation, and let's keep that going. And to Commissioner Dominguez's point that was brought up earlier, I don't understand why identifiers are just not worn by everybody. I have to do it, and I'm just a health and human services worker. So maybe a conversation for another time. One ask of you, Chief Skinner. So next time we meet, can you please report if the new camera installations in downtown do have audio surveillance or audio capabilities? I would really appreciate that. Fourth, and I want to thank everyone for allowing me to be off camera. I'm super sick right now, and y'all didn't want to see any of that. And I am looking forward to Chief Skinner being at the Human Rights Commission on Tuesday. So thank you, Chief Skinner, for being there. And lastly, I appreciate every one of you. Thank you.
Commissioner Lehman.
Thank you, Chair. Just want to thank EPD and the city for providing a lot of people, the chief, the auditor, the professional standards, the union, what's the title? Policies are the recorder. So there's a commitment, and Holly, there's a commitment to this commission. It's really appreciated, the efforts of all of you. So thank you.
Mr. Hawkins.
Thanks, Chair. I will continue to do my due diligence by clicking on the links that were provided in the report. I think they will answer the rest of the questions I had. I did want to express appreciation for Chief's attendance and your very quick responsiveness on several of the questions. It's incredibly important and helpful to have that perspective that you bring, because we have a very one-dimensional view of what we think we're seeing, and having you bring some of the explanations, just providing background such as if you refer an investigation to an outside agency, there's still a relationship to protect there. That's something that I hadn't considered, so I appreciate you bringing that up. And absolutely, EPD brought the big guns tonight. It's appreciated.
Thank you. And lastly, I have two points. One, I want to thank everyone. For some people, everyone. I want to personally thank Sergeant Julie Smith. You know, we're fortunate to have you on our team. We appreciate all your efforts, and I'm telling you, that's a lot of folk. If you haven't heard it, you're hearing it from me, and having that person that can provide us understanding can help us to just digging. You know, peeling the onion and so forth. She's very good. So kudos, let's give her a hand for Sergeant.
Thank you all.
And lastly, this is my 5th year. And I continue to do it because it means a lot, not so much to me, it means a lot for our community. And October is Breast Cancer Awareness Month. And I have chosen to do it for a 5th year straight. And we have a great dynamic team, 13 or 14 men, and we're raising money. I want to win this year. And I've come close. I've been second, third, so forth. I want to win, and I want the police. You can get those bikes, those cars, all those things help us focus on a disease that hopefully in our lifetime at this table we see a cure for. And I know a lot of people have been affected by breast cancer in this department, and most of us have people in our lives, family members, who have been affected. So to have these people step up and dig deep a little bit and put it in my name, because I plan on being at the top of the leaderboard for raising money. And I don't know what the amount is, but I'm pretty sure that for active participants, I might be #1 in the whole state of Oregon as far as raising money for that. And I do that to show my daughter that it's more than, don't just think of yourself, do things for others. And that's very important. This is the avenue that I use to show her that part of living, living in a city is stepping outside your comfort zone and doing things for others. So that is my comments. And I want to thank everybody for a great meeting. We got a lot of great information. I appreciate you all and have a good night. Meeting is done.
Thank you.